All right, in this explainer, we're going to break down the exact blueprint that top engineers use to get ready for some of the toughest technical interviews out there. And look, this isn't about cramming at the last minute. It's about a super focused, high-intensity sprint that's designed for real mastery. Let's get into it. It's a question, right? One that pretty much every aspiring tech pro asks. And the secret? It turns out isn't just about solving a bunch of problems, it's about having a powerful system. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that exact system. In this right here, this is the guiding light for the whole thing. The entire approach is built on this one powerful idea. Don't go chasing 1,000 new, shiny topics. Instead, you go deep. You rebuild and solidify the fundamentals until they are just second nature. Okay, so what does this focus sprint actually look like on a daily basis? Well, it's definitely not just some random to-do list. As you're about to see, this is a really carefully structured approach to learning, where every single task builds on the one before it. Think of it like a three-pronged attack that hits the problem from every angle. First, you've got the hands-on coding with data structures and algorithms. Then, you've got the theory, the foundation, with operating systems. And finally, the skill that ties it all together, technical communication.
All right, let's dive into that first pillar, which, let's be honest, is often the most intimidating part of technical prep, getting your hands dirty with a complex algorithm. This is where the theory really smacks into practice.
So, today's challenge is all about 1D dynamic programming, or DP for short. Now, this is a classic interview pattern, and the goal here isn't just to solve one problem, but to actually learn how to recognize this entire category of problems when you see them in the wild. So what is dynamic programming anyway? Well, at its heart, it's a super clever technique for not doing the same work twice. You solve the little pieces of the puzzle just once, you store their answers, and then you reuse them to solve the bigger pieces. That focus on spotting patterns, absolutely crucial. And to make this real, the blueprint uses a classic problem from LeetCode called climbing stairs. It's the perfect example, really, because you can solve it in a few different ways, and each way teaches you something new about how to optimize your code. Now, this slide is fantastic because it shows you the process. You don't just magically arrive at the perfect answer. You start with the most obvious brute force solution. Then you find out why it's slow and you optimize it with something called memoization, which is basically like creating a cheat sheet for your code. And finally, you refine it even more into a super efficient bottom-up approach. It's a journey from just it works to it's beautiful. And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, solving one problem is great, but the real prize is building a mental model that helps you spot and solve any similar problem you might face down the road. Okay, now this next step, this might just be the most important part of the whole algorithm section. The blueprint tells the engineer to just stop and write a summary. Explain in your own words what the telltale signs of a 1DDP problem are. You know, that simple act of writing it down is what cements the knowledge in your brain. It's the difference between just renting an idea and truly owning it. But look, being a top-tier engineer isn't just about writing elegant code, right? So this next part of the sprint shifts the focus away from the keyboard and onto those foundational concepts, and just as importantly, your ability to explain them clearly. So the fundamental concept for the day is a real classic from operating systems: the difference between processes and threads. Now, it might sound kind of basic, but trust me, this is a topic that can reveal a whole lot about how deeply a candidate understands what's going on under the hood of a computer. And here's what's so cool about this part of the plan. It's not just about reading about this stuff. The goal is to take what you've learned and synthesize it into a simple table, just like this one. You compare them on memory, on communication, on context switching. This act of creating the summary forces you to really pinpoint the key differences. It's so much more powerful than just passively reading an article. And that brings us to the third and final pillar of the daily sprint. Now, this is the part a lot of people skip, but it is so often the thing that separates a yes from a no in an interview. Knowing the answer is only half the battle. You have to be able to communicate it clearly and with confidence. And the exercise here, it sounds so simple, you might even be tempted to skip it. You take that climbing stairs solution you perfected, and you explain it out loud, like you're in an interview. You record yourself. And then, and this is the hard part, you listen back to it, and you find just one specific thing you can do better next time. I know, it's easy to think, what's the big deal?
I'm just talking to myself. But why is this framed as such a make or break final step of the day?
Well, because the payoff is huge. You literally can't explain something clearly if you don't understand it completely yourself. So it forces clarity. It shines a big, bright spotlight on any gaps in your logic. It's direct practice. It's like doing reps at the gym, but for interviews. And most importantly, it completes the circle, turning that raw knowledge in your head into effective, persuasive communication.
Okay, so we've walked through the three pillars: algorithms, fundamentals, and communication. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture, because this is where the real aha moment happens. And here's the absolute key takeaway. The magic of this sprint isn't in the specific to-do list. The real lasting value is in the underlying system, that repeatable pattern for learning itself. This right here is the blueprint. It's the engine for mastery that you can apply to, well, pretty much anything. Every single part of the day follows this four-step loop. You learn a concept, you apply it with hands-on practice, you synthesize it in your own words, and finally, you reflect on how well you can explain it. It's an incredibly powerful cycle. And you'll notice, woven through this whole thing is this intense focus on small, tiny improvements. Remember that communication exercise? The goal wasn't to become a world-class public speaker overnight. No, the goal was to find just one thing to improve. That is the secret sauce to sustainable, long-term progress. And that's really what I want to leave you with. This blueprint is so much more than just interview prep. It's a system for getting really, really good at any complex skill. So the question for you is this: looking at this cycle of learn, practice, synthesize, and reflect, what is the one feedback loop that you can build into your own process starting tomorrow?